Good evening, and welcome back. If you've ever looked out the window at night and felt a quiet shiver run through you, not from fear, but from the mystery of it all, tonight's story might speak to you. We'll wander gently through a time when people truly believed the night was something to be feared. So, settle in. Imagine a small fire crackling softly nearby. Let your shoulders relax. Let your eyes grow heavy. Before we begin, may I ask, from where are you listening tonight? What time is it there, late at night or early in the morning? Wherever you are, I'm glad you're here. Before we move further, if you enjoy soft history stories like this, you can press the like button and subscribe. No need to do it now. Maybe after you've drifted off. Now, let's begin our journey. A long time ago, the night was not like what we know today. There were no glowing screens, no lamps humming gently above your desk. When the sun slipped away, the world changed completely. Darkness was not a background, it was everything. People once said that when the light faded, another world appeared. Not a magical one, just one hidden by shadow. The shapes of trees became unfamiliar. The road that was clear by day now vanished into blackness. And in that emptiness, the mind began to imagine. If you're feeling your breathing slow, that's good. This is how they must have felt, sitting by a small fire, listening to the soft crack of burning wood, feeling both comforted and alert, because beyond that circle of light, there was only the unknown. In many early villages, nightfall meant retreat. People gathered close, shut their doors, and spoke in low voices. The world outside became quiet, except for the wind, the chirping of unseen creatures, and the gentle hum of the earth cooling under the moon. For them, darkness wasn't just absence of light. It was a moment of surrender. They couldn't control it, couldn't fight it. All they could do was wait until morning, a patience that, perhaps, we've forgotten in our bright cities today. If your thoughts begin to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let them drift, like small embers rising from a fire. The story will be here, waiting for you when you return. Back then, the line between safety and danger was simple. Light meant safety, darkness meant risk. It wasn't superstition, it was survival. In the dark, one couldn't see the eyes of a wild animal, the shape of a stranger, or even the edge of a cliff. So the night became a teacher, one that spoke in silence. It taught caution, patience, and togetherness. Families stayed close, whispering stories that made sense of what they heard outside. The snap of a branch, the howl of the wind, the unknown made familiar through words. In that stillness, people found meaning. The quiet forced them to listen to their surroundings, to their own heartbeat, and to the soft rhythm of time passing. The darkness, though feared, was also a mirror, showing what lived inside the human mind. As you listen, notice how your body begins to settle. Each breath slower than the last. You are safe, you are warm. You are part of the long, quiet history of those who once waited patiently for dawn. The night, to them, was both threat and comfort. It reminded them that they were small in a vast world, but also protected as long as the fire burned and each other's voices could still be heard. And as we rest here, imagining their world of flickering light and deep shadows, you might start to sense what they felt. Not fear exactly, but respect. The night was unknown, yes, but it was also a time to breathe, to pause, to simply be. Sometimes, when I think about those ancient nights, I imagine how quiet the world must have been. No cars, no hum of machines, only the wind moving through grass and the faint crackle of a distant fire. It's a kind of silence we rarely hear today, a silence that could both comfort and unsettle. For many, the night wasn't an enemy. It was a reminder that life had rhythms that work and rest. Day and night were gifts meant to balance each other. When darkness arrived, people accepted it, trusting that morning would come when it was meant to. That patience shaped generations. The human body, guided by the Creator's design, slows down under moonlight. Our eyes grow heavy, our heartbeat softens, and even our thoughts begin to loosen their grip. It's no surprise that many found peace in surrendering to the quiet. If you notice your mind drifting, let it. That's what this story is here for, to give your thoughts a place to rest for a while, like setting down a lantern beside you. Back then, people often sat by dim light, sharing quiet words or simply breathing together. They didn't always need conversation. Sometimes, togetherness was enough. The sound of another person nearby, steady and real, against the great unknown outside. They could hear the night animals, each sound a small mystery. A bird calling once, then again, the whisper of leaves. A reminder that life continued even in the dark, because the one who controls time never sleeps. In those moments, imagination began to shape the world. Stories grew like sparks, small, glowing, carried by breath. Some warned of danger, others spoke of courage. But all were born from the same feeling, the wish to understand what lies beyond the firelight. As you listen now, let that firelight flicker behind your eyes. You don't need to see it clearly, just feel its warmth, its quiet rhythm. You are safe here, exactly where you are. When dawn came, the fear of the night faded like mist. Birds began to sing, and the shadows softened into familiar shapes again. But deep inside, humans carried that memory, a quiet respect for the dark, a lesson in humility and wonder. Even today, when we can light up the world at any hour, some part of us still slows when the night arrives. It's as if that ancient rhythm still calls out gently, asking us to pause, to remember what it felt like to listen to a world half asleep. So as this story drifts to its end, let the quiet of those old nights settle around you. Feel the calm spread through your body, like a blanket of still air. The world outside grows softer now. You have time, you are safe, and somewhere in the distance, the quiet unknown continues to whisper, not to frighten you, but to help you rest. When the sun sank beyond the horizon, the world transformed. The warmth and color of daylight vanished, replaced by a deep and endless gray. For people long ago, this change was not just visual, it was emotional. The night didn't simply arrive, it swallowed the familiar world whole. Paths that were clear by day seemed to disappear. Trees looked taller, the wind sounded different, and every rustle hinted at something unseen. To walk beyond the reach of the fire was to step into a place where sight could no longer protect you. And that simple truth, that you couldn't see what might be there, became one of humanity's oldest fears. The darkness itself was harmless, but what it hid was not. A sudden sound could set every nerve on edge. A creaking branch, the distant call of an animal, the slow shift of the wind through dry grass, each one a whisper from beyond the firelight. In that moment, imagination filled the gaps. The mind began to draw shapes where there were none, to invent reasons for what it could not explain. It wasn't foolishness or weakness. It was instinct, a survival pattern written deep within human nature, telling people to stay alert when vision failed. It's easy, today, to forget how powerful that feeling once was. With streetlights, windows glowing, and cities alive through the night, we live in a world that has mostly conquered darkness. But for thousands of years, the night was a force of nature, something to respect, something to endure. Every sound could signal life or death. A hunter, a wild animal, a sudden storm, all could move unseen. So the human mind, trying to make sense of the unknown, gave it stories and names, not as belief, but as comfort. Because even fear feels smaller when it has a face, if you begin to feel the quiet settling around you. That's how they felt to half alert, half dreaming, caught between curiosity and caution. Their fear wasn't born from darkness itself, but from the simple truth that they didn't know what was out there. Every sound became a question. Every shadow was a possibility. And still, people learned to live with it, to adapt, to listen, and to wait for morning. Sometimes, those long nights tested patience more than courage. Imagine sitting beside a small flame, watching it dance while the air grows colder. You can hear the forest breathe, the quiet rhythm of living things that refuse to sleep. You want to close your eyes, but the mind keeps turning, imagining footsteps just beyond the circle of light. You tell yourself it's nothing. Still, your heart beats faster, and you glance toward the dark again. That moment, the fragile space between reason and instinct, was the birthplace of endless human stories. For people in small settlements or traveling through the wild, the dark could decide everything. A single mistake, a wrong path, a faint sound ignored could bring real danger. It wasn't just about fear of the unknown. It was about protection, survival, and the wish to see another sunrise. Night sharpened the senses. People learned to listen in ways we've mostly forgotten, to the movement of air, the sound of distant water, the call of animals carried by the wind. To them, silence had meaning. The night also carried its own rhythm. Long stretches of stillness were broken by sudden bursts of sound, a snap of wood, a cry in the distance, a murmur of leaves, and then quiet again. That quiet could stretch for hours, so deep that even your own heartbeat began to sound loud. The dark was not only something outside, it began to feel like something within, pressing gently at the edges of the mind. It wasn't always fearsome. Sometimes it was oddly peaceful, like being surrounded by the earth itself. Even today, when the lights go out during a storm, we still feel a trace of that ancient alertness. The small pause before our eyes adjust, the way every sound seems closer. It's the same memory carried across generations, a quiet echo of those who lived before light was easy. A quiet reminder that fear and awareness are two sides of the same coin. As the hours passed, people learned to trust small things, the glow of the fire, the sound of another person breathing nearby, the memory of paths walked in daylight. They couldn't control the night, but they could understand it, step by step, story by story, and in doing so, fear softened into respect. It became part of life's rhythm, something to live with, not to escape. And so, as the night deepened, people accepted its company. The unseen remained unseen, but it was no longer unbearable. They would rest near the fire, close their eyes, and let the sounds of the world fold around them, the wind, the insects, the distant rustle of leaves. They didn't need to know what was out there anymore. The fear remained, but gently now, like a heartbeat under a blanket of stars. When morning finally came, the change was almost miraculous. The light stretched slowly over the land, revealing what had always been there: trees, paths, stones, and the same world that seemed so threatening only hours before. That moment of realization, when fear dissolved into recognition, must have been powerful. People understood then that the night hadn't changed the world at all. It had only hidden it. Still, that experience left a mark deep within human memory, a quiet reminder that what we can't see often feels larger than it really is. Over time, this rhythm of fear and relief shaped culture itself. People began to tell stories, not just to pass the hours, but to explain what the dark concealed. A sound in the forest became a lesson about caution. The whisper of wind became a story about patience. Through these tales, fear transformed into wisdom. The unseen turned into imagination, and imagination became a way to make peace with the night. The firelight became both warmth and language, a space where questions about the unknown could safely unfold. As communities grew, the night took on structure. Guards watched the perimeter, torches lined the paths, and homes gathered closer together. The unknown still waited in the distance, but people began to feel less alone against it. Each layer of light, a torch, a candle, a glowing ember, became part of a human defense, not only against danger, but against loneliness. The glow itself didn't chase away every threat, but it offered comfort, a sign of presence. It was a small act of trust, born from faith that safety could be found in togetherness. If your mind drifts now, let it wander gently. The people of the past once did the same, listening, imagining, half dreaming as the hours passed. They didn't always need to know what was real. Sometimes, calm came simply from believing they could rest. That same stillness belongs to you, too, in this moment. Night also carried lessons in humility. It reminded people that they were not in control of everything. When sight failed, they learned to depend on hearing, on instinct, and on one another. That awareness created bonds, silent, strong, built in the dark. To share a night safely was an act of quiet cooperation. It was, in its own way, a reflection of mercy. How vulnerability taught people to rely on others and to give trust where it was needed. The fear of the unseen also encouraged observation. People learned to study the rhythm of sound and silence, the timing of wind, the language of animals. The night, though it hid much, revealed patterns for those who listened. It became a teacher that whispered softly, "Everything has its time, and not all things need to be seen to be understood." The wise learned that even the unseen parts of life could hold meaning. Sometimes, fear itself became a kind of prayer, not a plea, but a recognition of limits. When the horizon disappeared, people remembered how small they were in the vastness of creation. That awareness humbled the heart and quieted the mind, and in that stillness there was peace. The night could no longer be tamed, but it could be accepted, not as an enemy, but as a companion in silence. If you're listening closely, you might hear your own version of that quiet now. The low hum of the world around you, maybe the faint rhythm of your breath. These sounds are reminders that you're safe, connected, and present. The same sensations that comforted those before us can comfort you, too. As the centuries passed, the fear of the unseen never vanished. It simply changed its shape. The dark of forests became the dark of cities, the shadows of nature replaced by the unknown of human thought. But deep inside, that ancient alertness still lives. It makes us cautious at night, careful with our steps, yet also curious. It's not only fear, it's the instinct that once kept us alive. And so, the story of the night continues, not as a tale of danger, but of awareness. The unseen has always invited us to look deeper, to listen closer, to find comfort not in certainty, but in calm acceptance. The people who once trembled by firelight were not so different from us. They simply lived closer to the dark, and perhaps closer to the rhythm of peace that comes with it. Fear of the unseen was not born only from imagination. For early people, the dark truly was a place of danger. When the last light of the day faded, so did the ability to see threats that moved in silence. Wild animals began to hunt when the air cooled. Eyes glowed faintly from the edges of the forest, unseen by humans until it was too late. The night belonged to creatures that thrived where light could not reach. For them, the dark was a friend. For humans, it was a test of survival. The line between safety and peril was drawn by the fire's faint glow. Predators were part of the landscape. Lions, wolves, wild dogs, and other hunters moved quietly through the shadows. They were not evil, only following their instinct to survive. But to those sitting near a small flame, every sound became a question of life and death. One wrong step from the camp, and a person could vanish without a trace. That reality carved itself into the human mind. The night became not just a mystery, but a reminder of fragility, how small and temporary life could feel beneath the endless dark. Even without predators, nature itself could turn hostile after sunset. The absence of light hid cliffs, rivers, and uneven ground. Travelers could lose their way within moments. The same path that guided them safely in daylight could become invisible at night, swallowed by shadow. Injuries, cold, and exhaustion waited for anyone who wandered too far. And so, fear of the dark was not only emotional, it was a practical truth, passed down in warnings and traditions. Stay close, stay warm, wait for dawn. It's strange to think how something so ordinary to us now, walking outside at night, was once an act of courage. For early people, every movement in the dark demanded awareness. The darkness had rules, and ignoring them could be fatal. Yet, even in that fear, there was learning. People studied the night because their lives depended on it. They learned to recognize the call of certain birds, to hear the difference between the wind and a footstep. Night sharpened the senses. Fire was their companion, their fragile circle of safety. It offered not just light, but sound, a steady crackle, a heartbeat against the silence. The heat pushed back the cold air, and the glow revealed faces, hands, and familiar shapes. But beyond that light, the world vanished into black. The fire gave comfort, but it also reminded them how easily it could fade. A gust of wind, a bit of rain, and suddenly, the dark reclaimed its ground. The lesson was always the same. Life was delicate, and safety temporary. Over time, people began to build habits that shaped entire cultures around the rhythm of light and dark. Settlements were designed so homes faced inward, toward shared fires or lamps. Travelers moved in groups and avoided long journeys after sunset. The setting sun signaled not just the end of work, but the beginning of watchfulness. Families gathered, doors closed, and a quiet stillness settled. In that stillness, trust became as important as strength. Survival depended on both. Animals, too, carried meaning beyond their presence. A distant howl might mean danger nearby. The hoot of an owl, the snap of a twig, all these sounds became signs, small pieces of information in a world without light. Each family had someone who knew how to listen, how to interpret the language of the night. These were not superstitions, they were survival skills, ways to read the natural order created by the Almighty, learning to live in harmony with it, rather than against it. If you close your eyes, you might imagine that same darkness now, not as something frightening, but as something ancient and wise. The same stars that watched over them still watch over us. The same winds, still whisper through trees. In those moments of fear, they learned patience, and patience became their greatest shield. Even with danger close, humans adapted. They built small tools, lit torches, and carved paths they could follow even when light was scarce. Every discovery, from the spark of fire to the rhythm of walking by moonlight, came from that balance between fear and courage. They didn't try to conquer the night. They learned to move carefully within it, guided by faith that morning would always return. It was this quiet endurance that turned fear into understanding, and as the dark deepened, they learned one final truth: not everything dangerous could be seen, and not everything unseen was meant to harm. The night, though filled with risks, was also part of life's design, a time for stillness, renewal, and humility. Those who respected it survived. Those who feared it learned. And slowly, across generations, the dark became not only a threat, but a teacher. In every generation, the memory of those dark hours lingered. Parents told their children simple instructions before dusk: stay near the light, finish your work before the sun disappears, listen before you step. These weren't rules made from fear, but from love. Every family understood that the world changed once daylight faded. The same forests that fed them by day could swallow them by night. To live with this truth was not weakness, but wisdom. Humanity's earliest lessons were written in shadows, and each one whispered, "The dark does not forgive carelessness." As the centuries passed, people built better tools to hold back the night. The first oil lamps flickered in mud homes. Torches lined roads between villages. Later, small clay lanterns were placed near doors to keep watch through the hours of darkness. The light was not only for safety, it was a message of comfort, saying, "Someone is here. You are not alone." Even the faintest flame could calm restless hearts, reminding them that warmth and guidance were still possible, even when the world around them vanished into black. For travelers, the dangers multiplied. The roads were wild, stretching through forests and valleys where no walls or watchmen could help. Many carried small fires in clay bowls or relied on the moon's reflection to find their way. When clouds covered the sky, they stopped, built shelter, and waited. The wise ones never challenged the dark, they respected it. To move without light was to invite risk, and every generation had stories of those who didn't return. These stories weren't meant to frighten, but to teach the cost of impatience. Even now, when you walk beneath dim light or listen to the hum of a quiet night, you carry the same awareness. Somewhere inside, an ancient instinct reminds you to move carefully. It's not fear, it's memory. A quiet echo from those who learned through stillness and caution. The same instinct that once saved lives now helps us slow down, breathe, and notice. Over time, people realized that darkness revealed different truths. What felt dangerous could also be useful. Hunters learned to move silently under moonlight, using the cover of night to track their prey. Farmers learned that certain crops grew stronger when planted or harvested by cooler air. Rest itself became sacred, a rhythm that restored the body and steadied the mind. The dangers of night taught humanity discipline, and discipline became the foundation of progress. Villages grew larger, and with them came cooperation. Night watches were organized. Men took turns guarding the community while others slept. It wasn't just protection, it was trust in action. A sign that every person's rest depended on another's wakefulness. That quiet exchange built the first forms of collective security. Fear became shared responsibility, transforming danger into connection. Through that, night lost a little of its power. You might notice how even now, The rhythm of these thoughts begins to soften. Just as they once waited for dawn, you can allow the same calm patience to settle in. The story moves slowly, not to hold you awake, but to help you rest in the same quiet they once knew. As humanity learned to use fire and build safer homes, fear shifted. The animals retreated. The forests grew quieter. Yet the memory of danger remained, not as terror, but as humility. People understood that safety was never permanent. The world could still change in a breath of wind, a spark fading too soon, or a storm breaking without warning. They respected that fragility, and in doing so, they respected life itself. Generations later, this awareness became culture. Songs, warnings, and customs all carried traces of that ancient caution. The stories told by firelight were not just entertainment, they were survival codes disguised as myths. When someone spoke of the night as alive, it wasn't fantasy. It was their way of saying, be careful, but be calm. The balance between fear and peace became a shared wisdom passed through time, and when dawn finally returned each day, it brought more than light. It brought gratitude, a small sigh of relief, a quiet acknowledgement that they had seen another sunrise. The dangers of the dark were real, but they also made the morning more meaningful. In that rhythm of fear, rest, and renewal, humanity learned something timeless, that even in darkness, there is mercy, and in patience, there is safety. When people began to gather in permanent settlements, something beautiful happened. The dark no longer belonged entirely to the wilderness. Within each small village, tiny lights began to glow like stars scattered across the earth. These lights were simple: a flicker from a torch, the orange breath of a small fire, the soft pulse of an oil lamp. Yet together, they created something greater, a fragile constellation of safety. The night outside remained vast and unknown, but inside those circles of light, there was warmth, laughter, and rest. Light became a symbol of trust. When one household kept its fire burning, it meant there was life within, a family awake, and help nearby. The glow that escaped through the cracks of wooden walls was more than brightness, it was reassurance. Travelers passing in the dark could see it from afar and feel hope rise within them. It said, without words, you are not lost. People live here. That message of quiet safety carried across generations, stronger than any wall or weapon. The earliest communities often placed their lights at the center, a shared flame for all. It was where people cooked, worked, and told stories. Around it, they traded news, settled disagreements, and celebrated moments of peace. The flame was not worshipped or feared. It was respected as a means of mercy, something granted by the Almighty to bring warmth and clarity. And when night fell, that flame became a silent guardian, linking every heart in its soft, golden reach. If you imagine that glow now, try to feel what they felt, the way darkness pushed in from every side, and yet, in the middle of it, one light held firm. That's what safety felt like in those early nights. Not control, but calm. A quiet belief that the light would last just long enough to reach the dawn. As villages grew, the placement of lamps became thoughtful. People hung them by doorways, along narrow paths, and near the edges of their settlements. It wasn't just for vision, it was for comfort. A line of faint lights told others where home began and the wild ended. Each lamp marked a promise. Someone would watch through the night, and as the wind passed over those small flames, their flickering movement reminded everyone how fragile and precious their safety truly was. The firelight also carried sound, soft crackles, the hiss of oil, and the murmur of voices gathered nearby. In a world without machines or hums, that gentle noise became the heartbeat of the village. The rhythm of fire replaced the ticking of time. As long as the flame breathed, the night felt less empty. When it burned low, people fed it carefully, passing coals from one home to another so that no house was left in darkness. Imagine that, a whole village glowing together, each home connected by light. The warmth didn't come from one person alone, but from everyone sharing their small part. It's a simple truth that still matters. The things we keep alive together burn the longest. The glow of these villages changed the way people felt about the night. It was no longer a vast enemy, but a visitor that could be met with kindness. The dark arrived, yes, but it also revealed beauty. The sparkle of lamps reflected on water, the silver light of the moon above the roofs, and the quiet hum of life continuing beneath it all. The night had stopped being a threat. It had become a backdrop for human connection. Every flicker of light told a story. Some marked the return of travelers. Some celebrated new harvests. Some burned simply to say, "We are here. We endure." These moments of illumination turned into memory, and memory into tradition. People began to measure their nights, not by hours, but by the steady endurance of their lamps. As long as the flame remained, so did hope. And so, the village lights became more than survival, they became symbols of identity. Each settlement developed its rhythm of light, its own quiet language of warmth and vigilance. Long before cities or electricity, these tiny glowing circles reminded people that they were never truly alone. Together, they learned that the night could be shared, and that, in sharing, even the deepest darkness could grow gentle. The habit of keeping lights through the night grew into a shared rhythm. Families began to take turns watching the flame, feeding it when it grew small. Some believed that letting the fire go out before dawn meant carelessness, not in a spiritual sense, but in a human one. Fire was protection, warmth, and food. It reminded them of their responsibility to each other. If one home's fire died, another would bring a coal wrapped in bark, glowing softly in the darkness. These quiet exchanges built community long before written laws ever did. As time passed, light became part of the village's identity. In some places, people carved hollowed stones to shelter their flames from the wind. Others built small towers where oil lamps could shine farther, guiding travelers toward safety. From a distance, those lights looked like stars resting close to the ground, steady, living points that turned fear into direction. Each lamp, each flame, was a promise that someone cared enough to keep the darkness away for another. If you close your eyes, imagine those small lights stretching through the landscape, each one a whisper against the vast night. They didn't chase the dark away. They simply stood within it, calm and patient. That quiet defiance was never loud, never proud, just steady. It's a reminder that even small efforts, when shared, can make a world less frightening. The village lights also shaped the rhythm of rest. When the fires were strong, people spoke a little longer, shared stories, or sang quietly to children. When the flames burned lower, voices softened. The glow dimmed, signaling the body to slow, to surrender to sleep. In a way, the fire itself became a clock, measuring time not by numbers, but by warmth. Morning wasn't counted by hours. It was felt when the air turned cool and the world began to glow blue again. Villagers by rivers used light as guidance for boats returning late. A line of torches marked the shore, each one tended carefully by those waiting for loved ones. Imagine seeing that the soft trail of fire along the water's edge, trembling in the wind. It told every traveler, you are almost home. For a world without roads or compasses, that gentle light meant everything. It was both direction and comfort, a sign of care that reached across distance. Over generations, the simple act of lighting a flame became a ritual of peace. It carried no grand meaning, only gratitude. Each time someone struck a spark, they acknowledged the mercy behind it, that the materials of the earth could produce warmth, that the design of creation allowed light to exist within darkness. This gratitude, though unspoken, shaped how people viewed the night, not as an enemy to conquer, but a space to fill with patience and light. Notice how calm the thought of that glow feels. The world outside the circle of light may have been unknown, but inside there was peace. Even now, that same comfort lives in the faint glow of lamps, phones, or candles we keep nearby. We still seek that same quiet reminder that the smallest light can ease the weight of night. The beauty of those villages wasn't just in their warmth, but in their simplicity. No one light overpowered another. Each had its place, its gentle reach, its quiet purpose. Together, they formed a balance, not to erase darkness, but to live within it gracefully. That balance, once learned, became part of human nature, the instinct to bring light wherever we settle, to make even the darkest corners feel like home. As the centuries turned, light began shaping architecture itself. Open courtyards allowed moonlight to touch the center of homes. Windows were cut to guide morning rays toward sleeping spaces. Builders understood that comfort came not from brightness alone, but from the careful dance between light and shade. The night still belonged to the world, but within their walls, people learned how to soften its edge. And so, each flame, each lamp, glowing softly through the hours, carried more than function. It carried memory, the story of humanity's courage, its patience, and its shared desire to feel safe together. Long before cities, before noise and endless light, there were villages glowing quietly under the stars, their fires breathing softly through the night. They did not chase the darkness away, they simply learned how to live with it. And in that balance, they found peace. Long before humans conquered darkness with electricity, they listened. In the quiet of ancient nights, sound was the only thread connecting them to the unseen. When vision failed, hearing became their guide. Each rustle, each breath of wind carried meaning. The earth spoke softly after sunset, not with words, but with rhythms and echoes. For those who lived close to nature, the night was never silent. It was alive with whispers, a vast language made of movement, wind, and life continuing unseen. They didn't fear every sound. They learned to read it, to separate danger from peace, and to find comfort in familiar noises that meant home. The most common sounds came from life itself, the low hum of insects, the sigh of leaves brushing against one another, the distant cry of animals calling to their kind. These noises, though strange at first, became part of the world's heartbeat. People learned which ones meant rain was near, which warned of predators, and which simply marked the passage of night. The dark was no longer only a void. It was an orchestra, composed by the natural order set upon the earth. To listen was to understand, and understanding turned fear into calm. If you listen closely now, wherever you are, you might still hear traces of that same ancient world. The soft hum of the air, a passing breeze, the faint sounds of your surroundings. These are not interruptions. They're gentle reminders that the world is still alive, still turning, still breathing with you. The same sounds that once guided our ancestors now help us rest. In early villages, the night carried its own music. Dogs barked in the distance, goats shifted in their pens, and somewhere an old door creaked under the cool wind. These sounds told stories. To those who understood them, every noise had purpose. The call of an owl marked the hour. The rustle of dry grass meant something moved beyond the fence. Silence, too, had meaning. It could signal safety, or it could make the heart tighten with uncertainty. To survive the night, people learned not only to hear, but to interpret. As families sat together, they often found comfort in shared listening. The quiet between voices wasn't empty, it was a shared understanding. Someone would pause mid-sentence, tilting their head toward a sound outside. The group would wait, listening together. Then, when the moment passed, conversation returned as gently as it had paused. This rhythm of speech and silence gave their nights a heartbeat, a way of feeling connected not just to one another, but to the living world around them. In those quiet hours, children learned this art early. They were taught to identify the chirp of crickets, the rhythm of frogs, the flutter of wings passing overhead. To listen was a skill, a form of respect for the Creator's design. Everything had its voice, and every voice carried meaning. Even the silence between sounds that paused before the next whisper of wind held a peace that no words could replace. Let that thought linger for a moment. The night doesn't rush. It moves slowly, patiently, revealing itself one sound at a time. Just like them, you don't need to fill the silence. It already has its own story. You only have to listen. Over time, the sounds of the night became comfort itself. The familiarity of crickets, the rhythm of distant waves, or the quiet murmur of trees swaying in the breeze could lull even the most anxious heart to rest. These sounds reminded people they were still part of something larger, not alone, but surrounded by life continuing faithfully in darkness. In that awareness, they found peace. As generations passed, the sounds of night became part of human memory, woven into songs, lullabies, and the gentle rhythm of daily life. The world whispered its reassurance that even when we cannot see, creation still continues in perfect order. And in that realization, the night began to feel less like a threat and more like a lullaby waiting to be heard. As people listened night after night, they began to recognize patterns in what they heard. Certain sounds came like clockwork: the call of a bird just before dawn, the chorus of frogs before rain. The night's rhythm became a guide, a quiet teacher of time and change. Without calendars or clocks, they measured life by what they heard. It was a kind of trust, not in control, but in observation. By paying attention, they understood that everything moved with purpose, even when hidden in darkness. Over the years, this habit of listening became a form of communication. One person could call to another through the still air, and their voice would carry far. Simple whistles, claps, or songs became ways to share messages across the night. The quiet world made sound travel longer, smoother. Villagers could alert one another, call loved ones home, or share warnings before danger arrived. The night, once feared for its silence, had become a messenger itself. If you listen carefully to the sounds around you now, even in a quiet room, you'll notice small layers of life. The hum of air, the soft creak of furniture, maybe distant movement outside. These are not distractions. They are modern echoes of what people once depended on to feel connected. Listening brings calm because it returns us to that same still awareness. The night also became a place for stories built from sound. A crack of wood might begin a tale about wandering travelers. The distant call of a bird could remind people of loved ones far away. Each sound invited imagination, and imagination brought comfort. When the eyes could see nothing, the mind filled the dark with meaning. These quiet interpretations didn't cause fear, they made the unknown more familiar, transforming silence into understanding. Parents taught children that the sounds of the night were not curses or omens, they were reminders that life continued even when unseen. The croak of frogs meant water was near. The rustle of leaves showed the wind's gentle presence. The soft chirp of insects reminded them that creation never truly rests. Such lessons built patience, curiosity, and respect. To live close to nature meant learning to listen without judgment. You can imagine that world now, sitting near a faint fire, listening to the hum of night, knowing that every sound is a small sign of balance. The stillness between noises isn't emptiness. It's the pause where peace lives. As settlements grew, these nightly symphonies became familiar companions. People slept to the same melodies each night, the rhythm of animals, wind, and quiet breathing nearby. The brain learned that these sounds meant safety. Silence was not frightening, it was soothing. In that soft soundtrack of life, people found rest deeper than words could describe. Some believed the night itself listened back, not as a being, but as a witness. Every whisper, every lullaby, every quiet laugh became part of the air. The world held their voices gently, folding them into its rhythm. The idea was comforting, that nothing said in kindness was ever truly lost. It lived somewhere in the stillness, carried forward by the wind. When the first faint light appeared in the east, those sounds changed again. Birds began to stir, animals shifted, and human voices returned, layering over the softer ones. But even then, the echoes of the night remained, lingering in the memory like a dream that fades slowly but never disappears completely. It was the quiet reminder that rest and movement, day and night, were two halves of the same harmony. And as people rose to greet the morning, the sounds of the night slipped gently back into silence, leaving behind their calm message that peace is never far away. It only waits for us to listen. For in every whisper of wind, in every still pause between breaths, the world continues to hum its quiet, endless lullaby. When the noise of the day faded and darkness settled, the mind awakened in a different way. Without the distractions of light and movement, people found themselves alone with their thoughts. The night had a way of slowing everything down, not only footsteps and speech, but also the endless stream of ideas that filled the waking hours. It was a kind of stillness that invited reflection. For many, this quiet was not loneliness, but a form of rest for the spirit. When the world outside went silent, the world within began to speak softly. In those ancient nights, imagination grew stronger. The mind painted images that the eyes could no longer see. People remembered stories, faces, and paths they had walked during the day. They replayed conversations, planned tomorrow's work, or simply let their thoughts drift like smoke from a fading fire. There was no hurry, no pressure. The rhythm of the night asked nothing from them, only presence. It was a time for gentle thought, shaped by the darkness that surrounded but did not harm. If you feel your own mind beginning to slow now, let it. The night has always carried this rhythm, a soft invitation to release the day's noise, to breathe, and to think more quietly. Just like them, you don't have to chase your thoughts. You only need to listen as they settle, one by one. For those who lived before constant light, the transition from day to night was almost physical. When the sun disappeared, so did urgency. The human body, guided by natural rhythm, responded to the dimness by softening. Muscles loosened, voices dropped, and hearts slowed. Even the mind began to move differently, no longer focused outward, but inward. In that inward space, people found both comfort and vulnerability. The dark reminded them that they were small, but also that stillness could bring peace deeper than any achievement. The night encouraged honesty. In conversations whispered near fires, people spoke of hopes, regrets, and quiet fears. Words carried differently in darkness, slower, softer, truer. Perhaps it was because there were fewer eyes watching, or maybe because the dark itself seemed to listen without judgment. In those quiet hours, thoughts long held back during the day found their voice. The night became a mirror, showing what the light often hid, the hidden corners of the human mind. As sleep approached, thought turned into dream. The line between imagination and memory blurred. For early humans, dreams were not mysteries to worship. They were extensions of thought, shaped by fatigue and feeling. The mind, resting from labor, continued to weave stories out of memory and hope. It was a natural process, one that reminded them that rest was not the end of awareness, but a gentler form of it. The night, in this way, became both a pause and a continuation. Even now, that rhythm remains. When we lie down in darkness, our thoughts begin to wander. Sometimes they move through the day that passed. Sometimes they drift into places we can't quite explain. It's not confusion, it's the mind letting go, floating slowly between awareness and peace. This is what humans have always done. The thinkers and observers of the past noticed how ideas often came at night. When the world was quiet, when there was no rush to act, the mind found space to imagine. Some of the simplest discoveries, tools, and songs were born in those dark hours, when stillness made creativity easier to hear. Night didn't silence thought, it refined it. It gave people time to listen to their own understanding. For parents and travelers alike, the quiet of night became a teacher of patience. They learned that not every question needed an immediate answer. Not every worry demanded action. The darkness was a reminder that some things could only unfold with time. Waiting was part of wisdom. They saw that just as the dawn arrived when it was meant to, so too did clarity come only when hearts were ready, and so they rested, trusting that their thoughts would soften with sleep. And as they drifted toward that sleep, their minds followed the rhythm of creation, slowing, quieting, releasing. In the space between wakefulness and dream, they found peace. The same peace that still waits for us when we close our eyes, when we let the world fade into quiet, and when we finally allow the night to guide our thoughts into calm. As hours passed and the fires burned lower, people often found themselves caught between awareness and dream. Their minds wandered through memory, rearranging the day into quiet meaning. Problems that felt heavy in sunlight became softer under the stars. The night seemed to lift the weight of decision and turn it into reflection. In that peaceful slowness, wisdom often arrived, not in words or visions, but in calm understanding. They didn't need to chase answers. The answers came when they were still enough to listen. Some noticed that the darkness encouraged imagination in ways daylight never could. Without sight, the mind built worlds out of thought. A spark of memory could become a landscape. A voice could turn into a story. In this quiet mental space, people shaped songs, ideas, and inventions that would later define their lives. The night was not an absence of creation, it was its cradle. Within darkness, the mind found room to expand without boundaries. If your thoughts begin to drift while listening, let them. The same stillness that nurtured creativity long ago can also guide you toward calm. You don't need to control your thinking. You only need to allow it to slow, like a river finding its way to rest. In those older times, storytellers waited until the deepest hours to speak, not to entertain, but to soothe. Their voices moved like soft wind, weaving memory with imagination. These tales were gentle reminders of patience and gratitude, lessons told when the world was at its quietest. Night gave their words space to breathe. Each listener could hear their own heart between sentences. The silence became part of the story itself. Night was also when people learned to forgive. Away from the distractions of work and daylight, reflection often turned to compassion. The quiet softened anger and reminded the heart of what truly mattered. Many would end the day by releasing grudges, understanding that peace within was part of survival. A rested heart could face the next sunrise with clarity. This nightly renewal became an unspoken ritual, not through ceremony, but through simple stillness. Perhaps you can feel that same rhythm now. The way silence brings balance, the way thoughts settle when nothing demands them. It's not emptiness, it's space, the kind where peace quietly grows. Those who kept watch through the night, the guards, the wanderers, the sleepless, often spoke of how the stars seemed to speak in their own language. Not voices, not signs, but patterns that reminded them of consistency. Every night held the same design, the same order. It showed them that creation was steady, even when their lives were uncertain. That steadiness comforted them, proof that the world was cared for, even when unseen. The stillness of night became a kind of healing. When the body rested and the mind slowed, worry began to lose its shape. People discovered that time itself could mend small hurts if given patience. They didn't need to fill every moment. Sometimes silence was the cure. In that rest, emotions softened, and the next morning felt lighter simply because they had allowed the night to do its quiet work. When dawn finally approached, the first faint light carried more than brightness. It carried renewal. Thoughts that began in uncertainty ended in calm. People woke not only refreshed but rearranged, clearer, quieter, and ready to begin again. The night had listened, and in return it had given peace. The mind, like the sky, had found balance between darkness and light, and as the sun rose, people didn't forget what the night had taught. They carried its lessons into the day, to pause, to reflect, to speak softly when possible, and to let patience guide them. In every quiet evening that followed, they remembered that peace wasn't found by escaping thought, but by understanding it. The night, for all its stillness, had always been the mind's greatest teacher. Fire changed everything. Long before walls, before weapons, it was the first true barrier between people and the dark. Its glow was small but powerful, a trembling circle of warmth that turned chaos into calm. When the flames rose, wild animals hesitated. The night stepped back. The same fire that cooked food and hardened tools also guarded life. To sit beside it was to be reminded that warmth could exist even in the middle of fear. The fire was not sacred in itself, but it was a mercy, a gift from the Almighty through nature, allowing humans to rest without constant dread of what moved in the shadows. The firelight gave humans their first sense of control over night. Within its circle, they could see one another, share food, and speak freely. Beyond it, the dark stretched endlessly, unknown and alive. Inside it, there was safety, laughter, and thought. The flickering light danced on faces, turning every expression gentle, every silence meaningful. People began to understand that community was as much protection as the flame itself. Alone, a person might tremble. Together, under firelight, they felt unbreakable. If you imagine that glow now, picture how calm it must have felt. The quiet crackle, the soft rhythm of burning wood, and the way shadows swayed like slow waves. It wasn't just warmth, it was presence. Every flicker reminded them they were still here, still alive, watched over by the same order that allowed day to follow night without fail. The fire's light reached only so far, yet that distance defined the world. Inside its glow was familiarity, the faces of family, the shape of tools, the ground beneath their feet. Beyond it was mystery. That thin border, where light met shadow, became the edge of safety. The flames formed a boundary not just against animals, but against uncertainty itself. It was the first human horizon, where courage began and caution held steady. Children grew up watching the fire. It was their first teacher in patience. They learned how a small spark could grow into protection, and how carelessness could make it vanish. They saw that warmth required attention, that comfort came with responsibility. When the flame burned low, someone would feed it. When it grew too wild, someone would calm it. In this simple act, they learned stewardship, the understanding that balance was part of survival. The glow of the fire also changed how people told stories. Its light painted faces in gold, making every tale feel alive. The sounds of crackling wood became the heartbeat of spoken history. Words flowed more slowly, carried by the rhythm of flame and silence. In that shared circle, time itself seemed to pause. The night outside could rage with wind or whisper with insects, but within the barrier of firelight, calm always returned. Try to picture that moment, dozens of small flames across a dark plain, each one surrounded by people breathing quietly, their eyes half closed, their hearts steady. It's easy to see why the fire became more than heat. It became a reminder of peace, a symbol of endurance passed from one generation to the next. The fire didn't erase fear, it balanced it. People still respected the dark, still listened for distant sounds. But the flame gave them courage to rest, to close their eyes, knowing that something bright stood between them and the unknown. It was the earliest form of trust and protection, a simple, visible promise that the night could be faced, not avoided. As time passed, the art of firekeeping grew. People learned how to build hearths, how to carry embers from place to place, and how to shield flames from rain. The fire was never allowed to die completely. Even when moving across long distances, travelers carried its glow with them, small coals wrapped in ash, a living memory of home. In that way, the fire became a bridge between places, a constant companion across miles of wilderness. And when they reached a new resting place, the first act was always the same. They rebuilt the fire. Before food, before shelter, before sleep, they struck a spark and watched it come alive again. It wasn't ceremony. It was gratitude, a simple thankfulness for the warmth that had followed them, for the light that stood guard until morning. The Firelight Barrier was not only protection from danger, it was the calm assurance that, even in the darkest night, there was always a small place of safety glowing in the world. When the flames grew steady and the air cooled, people began to relax into their evening rhythm. The fire's gentle pulse became the world's heartbeat. Conversations softened, laughter faded to murmurs, and silence took its rightful place beside them. The night beyond the light was still vast and wild, but inside the circle, calm reigned. The fire was not only protection, it was rhythm. Its rise and fall matched breathing. Its crackle echoed the comfort of being alive. In those simple moments, peace required nothing more than warmth and quiet. Around the fire, stories continued, not loud or dramatic, but thoughtful. Elders spoke of journeys, memories, and lessons shaped by time. The glow touched their faces as they talked, making every wrinkle shimmer like the lines of an old map. Children leaned closer, listening not just to words, but to the gentle sounds of the flame itself. Its crackle filled the pauses in conversation, turning silence into part of the tale. The night listened to, wrapping everything in patience. If you feel your own breath slowing as you imagine that glow, that's the same calm they once felt. The fire's warmth, the slow dance of shadows, all of it reminded them that rest was a form of strength. You don't need to hurry through the dark. You only need to stay near the light. Over time, the act of gathering by the fire became a language of care. To invite someone close to the flame was to offer friendship, trust, and safety. No one was left outside alone when the night deepened. Even travelers passing through were given a place near the warmth. The fire became humanity's first welcome, a gesture that said, "You are safe here." In its light, strangers became companions, and companions became family. The same flame that guarded against danger also shaped thought. The rhythm of its movement drew the mind inward. Some would watch the glowing embers and drift into quiet reflection, remembering loved ones, thinking of the future, or simply letting the mind rest. Fire was not just seen, it was felt deeply. Its warmth reminded people that mercy still existed in the coldest moments of life. That protection could come from something so small, yet so essential. Picture that quiet scene, the steady crackle, the warmth brushing against your face, the sound of gentle breathing nearby. It's easy to see why fire became a symbol of endurance, not pride. It was never about conquering darkness, but about surviving it together. In many villages, the central fire never went out. It was tended through storms, guarded during illness, and shared during hardship. To keep it alive was to keep the community's heart beating. The flame connected every household, every life, across the long stretch of night. It was a promise that no matter how far the world fell into shadow, there would always be light, even if only in one small place. As generations passed, firekeeping became an art of patience. It taught humility, focus, and gratitude. Children learned that the smallest spark could bring both warmth and harm. They understood that care was a form of strength. Through these lessons, the fire became more than a tool. It became a teacher, a quiet guide that showed the balance between protection and respect for creation. Eventually, as the world changed, fire remained at the center of human life. It burned in hearths, forges, and lamps, shaping work, comfort, and community. But its greatest gift was emotional, not practical. It gave people a sense of presence, a way to gather, a reason to pause. When people sat together, facing the same glow, they felt equal. The flame didn't care who was strong or weak. Its light belonged to all. And when dawn began to rise and the fire burned low, the last embers glowed like tiny memories of the night. People would stir the ashes gently, saving the warmth for later. The dark had been held back once more, not through power, but through patience. In those final moments before sunrise, the Firelight Barrier had done its work, a faithful companion reminding humankind that, in every shadow, there will always be light enough to endure until morning. As centuries passed, humanity's view of the night began to shift. What was once only fear slowly became fascination. People realized that darkness did not destroy the world, it simply hid it for a while. The same land that glowed under sunlight still existed beneath the shadows, waiting quietly. With this understanding came a new kind of respect. The night was not just absence, it was balance. Just as rest followed work and silence followed speech, darkness followed light. It had a role to restore what the day had exhausted. People began to see that even the dark carried a quiet kind of power. They noticed how the world itself responded differently after sunset. Flowers closed their petals, animals retreated to nests or came alive under the stars, and the air cooled enough to breathe freely again. The rhythm of nature revealed something deeply wise, that rest was not weakness, but renewal. Every living thing followed this pattern, created in balance. Night was no longer something to survive. It became something to trust. Beneath the stars, life slowed, the heart steadied, and gratitude found its place again. As you listen, let that rhythm settle in your thoughts. Light and dark, motion and stillness, each one depending on the other. The world doesn't rush from one to the next. It breathes between them. You can, too. Darkness also began to shape imagination in new ways. What had once been filled with fear became a space for creativity. Poets, travelers, and thinkers found that ideas came easier at night when the noise of the day had gone quiet. When the only light left was gentle. They saw how the absence of sight made other senses stronger. The ear became sharper, the heart more aware. In that quiet space, thoughts found room to stretch and wander. The night became a canvas for reflection. The stars, too, began to carry meaning, not as objects of worship, but as signs of direction and consistency. People looked upward to navigate their journeys and to measure time. The steady movement of the stars reminded them of order in creation. Proof that even in the darkest hours there was design and purpose. They realized that darkness did not erase order, it simply revealed it in a different form. The night sky became a lesson in patience and trust. Within villages, darkness encouraged gentleness. Voices softened, steps slowed, and the rush of daylight disappeared. People learned to speak with care and move with calm. They discovered that not everything needed to be done under the sun, that reflection, planning, and calm conversation had their place in the hours after dusk. The night became a teacher of manners and mindfulness, showing that peace often begins when noise ends. If you listen to the quiet now, you may sense what they felt, that the dark isn't empty at all. It's full of space, full of softness, full of rest. There's power in that calm. It doesn't command attention. It invites it. As generations passed, artists and thinkers began to associate darkness with depth. What could not be seen was not forgotten. It was simply unseen for a reason. The human heart learned that not every truth needed light to be understood. Some lessons revealed themselves slowly, like stars appearing one by one as the sky deepened. The night became a metaphor for growth, quiet, unseen, but steady. The power of darkness was subtle, not forceful. It didn't rush, it didn't demand, it restored. It reminded people that silence could be strength and stillness could be action. The world slept not because it stopped living, but because it needed to continue living well. The dark was mercy, a pause written into the rhythm of creation. Humanity began to honor that pause, not fear it. And under the night sky, people felt equal again. The dark hid differences of wealth, strength, and status. Every person, whether ruler or wanderer, looked the same under starlight. That quiet equality was humbling. The night, once thought to be a time of vulnerability, became the great leveler, a reminder that all stand small beneath the vastness of the sky, all in need of rest, all capable of peace. When people finally began to accept the night as part of life's design, they stopped rushing against it. They learned to move with its rhythm instead of fearing it. Work ended earlier, fires were tended calmly, and the quiet between conversations became longer. This stillness changed not only how they lived, but how they thought. The night became a gentle boundary between days, a reminder that life was not endless movement, but a cycle of effort and rest. To honor the dark was to honor balance. As villagers grew, so did their ability to live peacefully within the night. Lamps glowed at the edges of homes, watchmen walked their slow rounds, and families gathered in soft clusters of light. They began to understand that darkness was not the opposite of safety, it was part of the safety itself. It gave time for healing, for quiet reflection, for renewal before dawn. The night was no longer something to survive, but something to share. If you notice your own breathing deepen now, that's what they once felt, the body finding harmony with the world's slower rhythm. The calm of darkness invites you to rest, not because everything is over, but because everything continues. Quietly, exactly as it should. In that calm, people found strength they had never known. The darkness, once feared, became a test of patience and faith. Those who stayed still long enough discovered that the world's silence could be comforting, that the unseen was not always a threat, but sometimes a refuge. To sit in the dark without fear became a mark of wisdom. The brave were not those who fought the night, but those who understood it. Darkness also revealed the beauty of small things. A single spark of firelight, a soft whisper, the touch of another's hand, all became more vivid when the rest of the world faded away. The night taught focus. It showed people that value doesn't always come from size or brightness, but from presence. A single moment of calm could hold more meaning than an entire day of noise. The dark made life feel deeper, not smaller. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the world without lights, only starlight above, only breath around you. This was how humanity first learned to feel its place in creation. Not above it, not apart from it, but within it. The dark wasn't something to defeat, it was something to understand. Those who traveled under the stars learned a different kind of confidence. The faint glow above became their map, guiding them across wide lands and open seas. They trusted those small, steady lights to bring them home. And through that trust, they learned another truth. The same power that hid the world in darkness also revealed it again, slowly, in time. Night and day weren't enemies. They were partners, taking turns to keep the earth in rhythm. Over time, the night came to represent renewal. After long labor, it brought rest. After confusion, it brought reflection. After noise, it brought silence. These weren't opposites, they were necessities. The darkness reminded people that no one can see clearly without pause, that no one can live endlessly in brightness. To pause was to live wisely, to let time breathe. Communities began to celebrate the calm of night without excess through quiet songs, gentle talks, and moments of gratitude. They didn't need ceremony or noise. They only needed awareness. The night itself was enough. Its still air reminded them that everything living moved within the same mercy. Light to dark, work to rest, sound to silence. In that design, there was harmony, and when dawn finally arrived, It didn't erase the dark, it fulfilled it. The night's rest gave meaning to the light that followed. People opened their eyes to morning not with relief, but with appreciation. They understood that both parts of the day belonged together. Light gave them energy, and darkness gave them peace. The power of the night had never been in what it hid, but in what it restored. Hearts that were patient, minds that were calm, and souls that remembered the beauty of slowing down. When light began to move beyond fire, the world changed again. It didn't happen suddenly. It arrived one small flame at a time. Oil lamps flickered in homes where once only the hearth had glowed. Small glass bowls held liquid light, each one stretching the day a little longer. People could now weave, write, or speak quietly even after the sun had gone. For the first time, night no longer marked the end of activity. It became a softer continuation of life. The world began to blur between what belonged to day and what belonged to night. Yet, even with that power, many still paused before lighting their lamps, remembering that too much light could erase the peace that darkness once gave. The first lamps were humble creations. A bit of oil, a wick of twisted fiber, and patience, that was all. But their impact was profound. The gentle flame burned slower than open fire, steady enough for thought. People sat longer with their work, their books, or their own reflections. The glow filled corners that had never seen light before, revealing both comfort and imperfection. It was as though the world had taken a quiet breath and decided to stay awake a little longer. The boundaries of the night began to shift. If you imagine that scene, the slow lighting of a single lamp in a dark room, notice how it feels. Not bright, not overwhelming, but warm. That small light is like a whisper, not a shout. It reminds us that illumination was meant to comfort, not to conquer. As these lamps spread through villages and cities, people discovered new rhythms. They began to gather indoors long after sunset, reading, sewing, or simply talking. Work and leisure blended into the night, and life stretched beyond the limits of the sun. Yet, with each hour gained, something quiet was lost, the deep silence that once defined the dark. The world was growing brighter, but also busier. The lamps that freed them from darkness also taught them the cost of constant wakefulness. Still, the first night of light must have felt like a miracle. Imagine walking through a settlement where dozens of small flames shimmered behind windows. The air filled with warmth and faint trails of smoke. For the first time, people could look across distance and see each other's faces under the same gentle glow. Fear gave way to curiosity. Light had connected them, a quiet bridge of visibility across the sleeping world. As you listen now, feel that slow expansion, the way the world brightened without hurry. It's the same rhythm our ancestors felt, awe mixed with gratitude, light emerging gently like dawn. The invention of lamps also deepened appreciation for patience. Oil had to be gathered, wicks trimmed, flames tended carefully. The act of lighting a lamp was never careless. It demanded focus, care, and calm hands. This ritual taught people mindfulness before the word ever existed. In tending their lamps, they tended themselves, watching, adjusting, learning the rhythm of flame. As generations passed, cities grew, and the glow of human light began to climb into the sky. Torches lined pathways, lanterns swung from wooden poles, and markets remained open deep into the night. The world became louder, brighter, more alive. Yet, in the corners of that brightness, people still sought the shadows, quiet spaces where they could think and rest. Remembering that stillness was as vital as movement, the coming of light gave humans freedom, but it also asked for wisdom. It showed them how easily comfort could become dependence, how quickly the blessing of light could blur into restlessness. Yet for those who kept balance, who lit their lamps but still honored the silence between, the night remained what it had always been, a gift, a space not just for seeing, but for understanding. And so, as the world slowly filled with lamps and lanterns, humanity learned again what it had nearly forgotten. Light was powerful, yes, but its beauty came from contrast. Without darkness, it lost its meaning. The coming of light was never meant to end the night. It was meant to teach people how to live gently between both. As human skill advanced, light grew stronger. Oil lamps gave way to lanterns made of metal and glass, protecting flames from the wind. Travelers could now carry light through the night, crossing roads and rivers without fear of losing their way. For the first time, distance felt smaller. The glow of a lantern became a symbol of possibility, proof that even in darkness, guidance could be made by human hands through knowledge gifted by the Almighty. Light was no longer just survival. It had become an expression of hope. Soon, cities began to shimmer with rows of lamps lining their narrow streets. Where once the night had hidden everything, now people could walk freely, trade, and talk long after sunset. The rhythm of the world shifted. The quiet of night that once signaled rest was replaced with the hum of new activity. Humanity had extended its day. It was progress, but it also asked a silent question. How much light does a person truly need before peace begins to fade? If you close your eyes now, imagine that glow stretching across the distance, 1,000 small flames reflected on water, lighting homes, paths, and hearts. It's beautiful, yes, but even beauty must breathe. Every light needs its darkness to shine fully. As decades passed, invention quickened. The discovery of electricity changed everything. Light no longer depended on oil, fire, or human hands. It could be summoned instantly, pure, bright, endless. Night lost its boundaries. The stars faded behind the veil of city light, and for the first time in history, the world forgot what true darkness looked like. There was comfort in this brightness, but also a quiet loss, the disappearance of mystery, of natural rhythm, of sleep that came easily when the body followed the earth's design. In this new world, light became both blessing and burden. It gave safety, knowledge, and progress, but it also brought restlessness. People worked longer, slept less, and began to live in a state of half-dream, half-wakefulness. The soft lull of night was replaced by the constant hum of modern life. The power to erase darkness had made the world more productive, but also more tired. The lesson of balance, once written in every sunrise and sunset, began to fade. Even now, that lesson waits quietly. When you dim your lights before sleep, you return to an older wisdom, the body remembering that peace is found in rhythm, not in brightness. The night still asks the same gentle question it always has: when will you rest? Some began to miss the darkness. Artists, travelers, and thinkers sought it again, leaving the cities to watch the stars in silence. They realized that true light, the kind that warms without blinding, lives in moderation. They rediscovered the comfort of small lamps, soft glows, and evenings spent under quiet skies. The return to darkness was not a rejection of progress, but a remembrance of peace. The balance between light and dark became a reflection of life itself. Every bright space needed a shadow. Every sound needed silence. The two were never meant to compete, but to complete one another. Humanity's greatest challenge was not to create endless light, but to remember when to turn it off. For only in darkness can rest truly begin, and only in rest can light have meaning again. And so, the story of light became the story of restraint. People learned that wisdom was not in shrining without end, but in knowing when to stop. The night, once feared, had taught patience. Now light, once celebrated, was teaching moderation. The two forces, brightness and stillness, had always been partners. The coming of light was not the end of the night, but a new chapter in how humans learned to live within both. When the lamps finally dimmed and sleep returned, people rediscovered what the earliest generations once knew. That peace is not found in conquering the dark, but in trusting it. Light is guidance, and darkness is rest, both created with purpose, both needed for balance. The world, turning quietly beneath the stars, continues to remind us every evening, there is mercy in the dark, and there is gentleness in the light that follows. After generations of chasing light, people slowly remembered the beauty of the dark. The quiet hours they once feared became something they began to seek again. Not the cold, lonely kind of darkness, but the calm one, the kind that lets thoughts breathe. For many, it became a time to slow, to reflect, and to remember that peace was never in constant motion. The night, once seen as an ending, returned to its rightful place as a pause. It was not the absence of life, it was the rhythm that made life whole. People began to notice small things again. The faint silver of moonlight through windows, the soft rhythm of their own breathing, the sound of wind moving gently through quiet streets. These moments didn't demand attention, they offered rest. The dark gave everything a gentler shape. The sharpness of day softened into blur, and in that blur there was comfort. What once frightened the heart now soothed it. The world hadn't changed, only the way people saw it had. As you listen now, you might notice the same feeling, that slow, steady warmth spreading through stillness. This is what they discovered. The dark was never against them. It was simply waiting for them to stop running long enough to listen. In this renewed understanding, the night became a companion again. It was no longer something to conquer or escape. It was a friend, quiet, patient, and forgiving. People began ending their days with calm instead of noise, dimming their lamps, letting their thoughts wander into gratitude. Families sat together in low light, speaking softly or not at all. The silence between them was peaceful, filled with understanding that words could never match. The night reminded them that presence was enough. The same firelight that once kept danger away now became a source of comfort, not necessity. People lit small candles not to survive, but to reflect, to remember the long journey that had brought them here. They had walked through fear, through danger, through the endless brightness of modern life, and finally returned to balance. In that balance, they found something simple. Stillness is not emptiness. It is peace in its purest form. Even cities, bright and restless, began to rediscover the value of darkness. Curtains drawn, lights dimmed, streets quieted. Little by little, people reclaimed the night for rest. Scientists began to speak of circadian rhythms, but ancient people had known it all along. The body, the heart, and the earth share the same pattern, day for effort, night for calm. It was never about choosing one or the other. It was about remembering that both are needed. If you close your eyes, you may feel that rhythm moving through you, the same rise and fall that has always been part of creation. It's the quiet reminder that nothing must shine all the time. Even the sun rests. Even the heart slows. Even the mind deserves silence. The return to darkness was not a rejection of progress, but a return to gratitude. Light and shadow were never enemies, they were partners. People began to see that rest was not laziness, it was wisdom. The night was the gentle side of life's balance, created to remind them that strength and peace are not opposites, but companions. In that truth, humanity began to feel at home again beneath the stars. They learned to let go, to stop fighting the quiet, to trust that darkness, too, has its blessings, the unseen kind that soothes the heart and clears the mind. And as they embraced the night once more, they realized that peace had never left. It had only been waiting for them to slow down enough to notice, and in that awareness, sleep returned, soft, natural, unforced. The world breathed together again, as it always had. The night was no longer dangerous, it was beautiful, and through it, people remembered that true safety is not found in endless light, but in learning when to rest within the dark. The night had once been a teacher of fear, then of patience, and finally, of wisdom. It taught humanity that every kind of darkness holds a lesson, not about danger, but about trust. When the world turned silent, people discovered their own hearts again. They realized that quiet was not a punishment, it was a gift. The dark was a mirror, showing how peace had always been close, waiting to be remembered. They didn't need to chase light to feel safe anymore. They only needed to rest. As time moved forward, this understanding grew deeper. Night became a symbol of reflection, a space where people could let the weight of the day dissolve. Even in the busiest cities, there were moments when everything slowed, lights dimmed, voices softened, and the hum of life turned into a lullaby. The same pattern that once guided early humans still guided their descendants. The form had changed, but the purpose remained the same: to restore balance between motion and stillness, between sound and silence. As you listen, notice how quiet feels different now. It's not emptiness, it's fullness, without noise. It's the part of life that speaks softly, the part that heals quietly, the part that reminds you that peace isn't something you find, it's something you allow. For many, the night became sacred in its simplicity. No rituals, no ceremony, only the steady rhythm of breathing, the comfort of knowing the world continues even when unseen. The stars above, the wind outside, the slow turning of the earth, all moving in perfect order. People learned that they didn't need to fill every moment with light or sound. The world had been designed to rest, and so were they. When they honored that design, life itself felt easier. The more they accepted the night, the more they understood the meaning of gentleness. Harshness belonged to the day, to effort, work, and striving. But night taught tenderness, soft voices, quiet gestures, the simple care of watching over one another. Within darkness, kindness grew stronger because nothing demanded attention. Every act of patience, every calm word, became visible like a small flame glowing steady against the vastness around it. Close your eyes for a moment. Feel that same calm the first humans once felt by their fires. Not fear, not excitement, but quiet gratitude. The night is still the same, endless and patient, waiting for rest to return to those who seek it. Eventually, people came to see that the night wasn't just part of the world, it was part of them. The need for sleep, for stillness, for reflection, all of it was written into human nature. Fighting the dark meant fighting against balance itself. Accepting it meant finding harmony again. In this understanding, the night became not just a time, but a teacher, one that spoke without words and guided without force. When they looked to the horizon and saw the faint light of dawn, They no longer cheered the end of darkness, they thanked it. The night had done its work. It had quieted the noise, steadied the heart, and prepared the soul for another day. Morning was no longer an escape. It was a continuation. Every sunrise was a reminder that rest had a purpose, and that peace, once found, could be carried into the light. And so, across time, people learned to live gently with the rhythm of the world, to work when the sun shines, and to rest when the stars return. The night that once frightened them had become their greatest comfort. The circle of life, once broken by fear, was whole again. Darkness had not been conquered. It had been embraced. As the story of the night closes, the world outside remains soft and still. The stars, the quiet air, the steady heartbeat of creation, all of it reminding us that the simplest truths are often the most powerful. That peace does not arrive with noise, but with calm. That safety is not found in endless light, but in trust, and that every night, no matter how dark, carries within it the promise of dawn. Thank you for listening to this quiet journey through time. If you've enjoyed this peaceful story, I invite you to subscribe and return next time. There's always another forgotten piece of history waiting to be rediscovered, softly, slowly, and safely, just like this one. Next time, we'll drift across the ocean together to explore why did sailors fear ghost ships on the open sea. Until then, may your night be calm, your thoughts be light, and your rest be deep. Good night.